So recently I was asked to recommend a small and light travel camera, and of course I immediately thought about the Sony ZV-1 just because I didn't think that the Mark II was the biggest upgrade, at least on paper, and I really like it. It's really small, it's not that expensive, and so it's like a no-brainer. But then I thought, maybe there is something to the ZV-1 Mark II because a lot of people switch to it, and also I've never really tried it out, and sometimes trying something out it's just different than you expect just from the spec sheet. And then I thought, wouldn't that be a great opportunity to make a YouTube video about it? So that's what I'm doing right now. I have the ZV-1 right here, I have the ZV-1 Mark II as well. We're gonna test them out together and see which one is actually better. Let me start out by telling you about some of the reasons I wasn't really satisfied with the upgrade initially. So the ZV-1 had a 24-70 equivalent lens that went from an aperture of 1.8 to 2.8 on the long end, which was really great for this small camera. The new one, the ZV-1 Mark II, now has an 18-50 equivalent lens that goes from an aperture of 1.8 to an aperture of 4. So you essentially get a lens that is wider but lets in less light on the long end and also has less reach. In addition to that, the old lens also was stabilized while the new lens is not, so you have to rely entirely on software stabilization. I was also hoping for the ZV-1 successor to get some new video codecs, like maybe 10-bit, maybe a Cinetone. 4K 60 would be nice because it's a stacked sensor, it should easily be possible, and it got none of that. And at the same time, the price increased significantly. So in paper it seemed to me that you pay like 50% more for new menus, a better tripod mount, and yeah, a wider lens, and that's it. But let's see if my judgment was actually correct or if it's different in the real world. Okay, so let's start out by actually comparing the lenses. First up, I want to compare the reach and bokeh as well, so I'm gonna be standing in the same spot and zooming in as far as I can with both, and then I'm gonna walk up to the tree in this case with the ZV-1 Mark II just to match the shot of the ZV-1 as closely as I can so you can compare the background blur. Next up, let's do a vlogging test as well so you can compare that. Keep in mind that the old lens had stabilization, so you could do just the standard stabilization with no crop. That being said, that's really bad, so I'm gonna show you right here, but it's really bad compared to the active one, and I think you have to use active, so I'm gonna compare active with active and you can see the vlog test in that case. Right, so this is the standard stabilization on the ZV-1 Mark I, and this is what it looks like when you just walk normally. Alright, and this is the active stabilization, so this is the shot you're gonna get. It's at the widest setting at 1.8, and we're in the active stabilization mode, as I said. Alright, so this is the vlog test of the ZV-1 Mark II with active stabilization. We have the microphone set to directional, so it should record me, and I'm holding it around an arm's length away, so this is the stabilization and this is the shot you'll get. You will definitely notice that the ZV-1 Mark II has a much wider shot, which is better for vlogging and more convenient. Alright, so next up let's talk about color, because I think for a small camera like this, it's really important that the color looks great straight out of camera without any post-processing. So as I said, I was hoping for a Cinetone because I think it's really Sony's best straight out of camera profile, at least for video. Unfortunately, we didn't get that, but I think they still improved the color somehow. So when I looked side by side, and I will show you some images right now that I've taken today, I've set both of them to the same white balance. It's both set to daylight, so they should look identical. But the new one I think just has a nicer look overall. Of course, it's a matter of preference, but I think they have tweaked the color science somehow. And the straight out of camera pictures and videos look better on the new camera just in the standard color profile. So yeah, as I said, you can compare it for yourself, but I think the new one looks better, and especially with a small travel camera like this should be a very important aspect because you want to have the images ready right after you take them. Next up, let's talk about some other smaller differences. So the new touch menu obviously is great. I don't really use it as much on my other Sony cameras, so I didn't think it was a big deal, but on this small camera where you don't have a lot of buttons, it's really nice to have this better touch menu because you can do everything, like set your aperture, shutter speed, basically really just everything you can set on the touchscreen, and it's really nice to have that ability. In addition to that, it has the same better menu as all other Sony cameras with the quick menu where you can change a lot of functions without going deeper into the menu, which makes it much easier to use, and I really prefer that menu. Of course, if you're used to the old menu and you have it set up nicely, it still works, but it's a nice selling point from the new camera. In addition to that, the tripod mount is now also in a better space. It used to be right next to the battery door and you couldn't really change the battery while you were using the camera. Now it's moved to the other side, which is much more convenient. Next up, it's also using different materials. I think the old one actually had better materials, so it had a rubberized grip on the back and front. Now it's just one piece of plastic, and the microphone also looks different. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal, it's just something I've noticed. The old one should feel a little bit better in the hand, but yeah, not the biggest deal. And last but not least, another change is that the microphone is supposedly better, so it should sound better. The new one is directional, and I think it sounded a little bit better in the vlog test, but it's not the biggest difference. For high quality audio, you should still plug in a separate mic, but you will have heard it in the vlog test, so you can judge for yourself. Alright, so where does that leave us? The new one looks better, but the images are gonna have a less blurry background on the long end. At the same time, you have a wider lens, and you still have all the same great things about the first camera. So the autofocus is good, it's very compact, and the image quality in general is very great. At the same time, you still have some of the annoyances of the old camera. So you have a small camera that is kind of annoying sometimes to use, but of course that's what you sign up for. It still has only 8-bit, and it still has only 4K at 30 frames. And at the same time, the price is significantly higher than before. As a conclusion for me, that means that if you can stretch your budget, I would, and get the new one just because it's nicer. Because of the wider lens, you can get better group shots. The photos are gonna look nicer, the videos are gonna look nicer straight out of camera, and it's gonna be nicer to use as well. The bokeh wasn't really that great on the old one either. It's not really the nicest blurry background compared to bigger cameras, so I think it shouldn't be the most important factor for this camera decision. At the same time, the new one, where it matters, was improved, except for the video codecs and the stabilization. At the same time, I think the missing lens stabilization isn't really the biggest deal, just because they look the same, or the new one is maybe even better in terms of the digital stabilization, and the lens stay wasn't that great on the old one in the first place. In general, it's kind of disappointing that it didn't improve in more areas. I was hoping for, like, as I said, S-Cinetone, 4K 60, stuff like that, so it's really a nice companion camera, especially for the higher price. They didn't give us that, so we're hoping for maybe the ZV-1 Mark III. But for now, the ZV-1 Mark II is nicer, but it also costs more, so it really depends on your budget. The old one, I think, was, due to the price, more of a no-brainer, and it was easier to recommend. And I would still recommend the old one if you can't stretch your budget to the newer, higher price. If you can, get the new one. It's a great camera, and I think I kind of underestimated it just because I went strictly just from the spec sheet and haven't really had the opportunity to test it out before. So now I know that the new one is significantly improved. It's nicer to use, it's more fun, and the photos look better. It's just still not the kind of perfect compact camera that I was maybe hoping for. For now, get the new one if you can afford it. If not, the old one is still great. You can get it for great prices now that the Mark II is out, and I think both of them look much better than the over-sharpened HDR look you get on an iPhone. In general, I think I'm just kind of sad that there isn't more competition aside from Sony in this segment, because there's no one really making these small cameras anymore. So yeah, just pick between the two depending on your budget, and I think you're gonna be really happy. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this new style of video. I thought I would try out something else, especially for a camera test. I thought with the great weather we have right now in Europe, it's a good time to just go outside and test it out together. If you get one of these cameras, enjoy and have fun with it. That's the most important part. Like the video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.